Hello everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy, I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. I'm being a little quiet because Naomi, my dear wife, is in the other room recording her Lifetime movie podcast, and I don't want to yell too loudly and have the Lifetime executives scream at her. Who's the goof in the background recording a different podcast? How is everyone? How are you all doing? I'm a little wrecked. Our dear little Mabel had a prophylactic mastectomy on Monday, and they took out a whole chain of mammary tissue because she kept getting these little tumors. And so we are caring 24/7 for our dog, who has now stitches along the entire length of her stomach, from like right below her neck all the way down to her leg, and it is extremely disturbing. but it needed to be done, and that's the tough thing about pets is, Mabel was, she bounced back basically the next day, but for Naomi and myself, it's the emotional stuff that still lingers, and it's really tough for us, and we're husks. So thankfully I recorded this interview a month or two ago because I was not a husk then. And this is Jamie Stewart. And if you don't know who Jamie is, why don't I read you his bio right now. Born and raised in Los Angeles, Jamie Stewart played in a number of bands as a teenager, including a parody band and a Bauhaus cover group. However, he didn't really find his voice until he formed Shoo Shoo in his mid-20s. The release of the band's first album, Knife Play, on the Kill Rock Stars imprint 5RC cemented their style, but it was with 2004's Fabulous Muscles that the band really started to break through. Since then, Shoo Shoo has recorded and released another 9 albums, toured the world, and their latest album, Oh No, was just released at the end of March on Poly Vinyl. Hey, I didn't plan it like this, but today is Bandcamp Friday. Why not go buy Shoo Shoo's new album? Come on, it's worth your money, it's worth your time, maybe not your blood, but I don't think they are asking for that. I have been wanting to talk to, what did I say, that blood thing? I gotta tell you folks, not only am I a husk, but the quarantine is still actively destroying my brain. But I wanted to talk to Jamie for years. I think I first wrote him, I don't know how many years ago, but we were never in the same city. And now we are in the same city, but I'm doing this all over Zoom because of COVID. But I've been a fan of Shoo Shoo since the beginning, since Knife Play. I remember seeing them. They were on tour, and they came through Pittsburgh. And I went to Pitt for college, and Pitt never really brought in interesting bands, but there's a small women's college right near Pitt called Chatham. And they would always bring in really awesome stuff. I think I saw Mira once, and I just remember, I don't think at that time I'd ever seen anything like Shoo Shoo, and I was kind of enthralled. And in the interview, I think we get into what makes Jamie, and by extension Shoo Shoo, pretty unique, so I hope you enjoy this. By the way, if this is your first time listening to Beginnings, thank you for checking out the show. If you want to check out some other episodes, I have been doing this for 11 years. I like to do a little recommended if you like here in the beginning. So if you like Shoo Shoo, you might like these other artists that I've interviewed. Just recently, I've talked to so many cool indie rock people in lockdown. Sam Prekop from The Sea and Cake, Thurston Moore, Mary Timony, Ellen Kempner from Palehound. That was pretty great. Mac McCon. Owen Pallett. That was a pretty good interview. And literally hundreds of other musicians, artists, TV writers, filmmakers, actors, comedians. So if you like what you hear and you want to subscribe to the show, you can do that on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon, Google, basically wherever you get your podcast from. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Andy Beckerman. And I got some amazing talks coming up. Bob Nastanovich from Pavement. The guys from Chavez are coming up. Terry Riley, world-changing 20th century composer Terry Riley. I talked to him from his place in Japan, and I just had a very fantastic, lovely talk with Isabel Campbell from Belle and Sebastian and many other projects. So stay tuned for those. But for now, let's talk to Jamie. You grew up in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of curious because I've been out, my wife and I have been out here for a couple years already, and we found it to be kind of suffocating in terms of like everyone, everyone we know is in the business. And like when we lived in New York, she's from New York, and I lived there for a decade. You know, we had friends who were teachers and, did other things other than entertainment. And
Sure.
I'm kind of curious, is that if you grow up here, do you have a different experience of the city than just like everything is a general?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, it's a big place. It's like if you live in Las Vegas, it's not only the Strip, you know?
Yeah, that's right. Everyone
Yeah.
that I've talked to from Las Vegas did not live in a casino.
Yeah. I mean, although I will say that my dad and my uncle were both in the music business. So growing up, everyone who was at my house as a kid were all musicians. But you know, the children I played with, none of their families were, maybe one or two were friends of my parents' kids or something. But mostly they were just kids from the neighborhood that I grew up in. Almost none of whom were involved in the music business or movies or anything like that.
Is the music business, so that would have been the 80s into the 90s, right?
When I was a kid?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was the music business at that time, as I'm using the phrase as suffocating? Sorry, let me ask the question, and then I will have a postscript, because my brain gets stuck on the logic of things. And I was going to say, is it as suffocating as the entertainment industry? But I'm comparing the music industry in the 80s and 90s to the entertainment industry now. And so I don't...
I wouldn't know. I mean, I was a... Oh, sorry, finish your question, pardon me.
No, that's how, like, that... But I'm wondering, like, did it even affect you? Did you, like, see what was going on as a child in the music industry then? Like, what your father and your uncle had to deal with?
Oh, I mean, to a degree, but I was pretty little. This is kind of a sad story. I do remember once I was playing the game 20 Questions with my dad, and I think I had learned the word phalanges, for toes or fingers in science class, and the answer to my question was alligator phalanges. And my dad became he completely flipped out with me, because it's basically there's no possible way you could conceivably guess alligator phalanges, right, specifically in 20 questions. And I did this because I wanted to, beat my dad at this game. And he flipped out and was just like, why is everybody trying to fuck me? Why is everybody trying to screw me over all the time? So I can only guess that had to do with his experience in the music business.
Oh.
Although he was very successful for a long time. And he had a drug problem, so he got out of the music business because he needed to get away from drugs. And then went into making music equipment. But, the music business is a shitty business. It was then, it is now, in different ways. So I unfortunately, he died a while ago, and I was never super close with my uncle, so I didn't get I wish now that I am a stone cold adult, I could talk to them about what their experiences were and get some advice from them. But I never really talked to them all that much about it. Oh, I do know one horrendous fucking story that happened with my dad. He was on. Do you know who Dick Clark is?
Yeah.
So he did this. There was this thing in the '60s. My dad was in this band, and they were on this Dick Clark package tour with really cool bands. It was my dad's band, the Byrds, Bo Diddley, And
Wow.
Paul Revere and the Raiders, they toured the U.S. for an entire year, like a year straight in a bus. And at the end of the tour, they got paid a total of $0. Like their management took all of the money. And, and they were teenagers when they signed the contract, and they were just excited to go on tour. And in the contract, it said the management gets all the money from the tour. So, yeah, the music business was unkind to my dad when he was a kid.
For the listener, my jaw literally dropped, and there was and my brain kind of fugue stated for a moment, because I was just I don't know, because I thought the stuff that I have to deal with, where 10% goes to this person or 5% goes to this person, and I'm just and you take home an you make a living after people take out their percentages, but to take out all of it is just it's so brazen.
I think it was, I'm sure that still goes on now with major label stuff, when they're signing people who have less experience. That thing still kind of goes on. But I'm sure, at the kind of beginning of the post-Beatles rock and roll explosion, I'm sure it was much worse before people had any idea about how sleazy it could be.
I asked this question because I'm kind of curious about people who go into the same area as their parents do, especially in the arts. And I was wondering, if you saw kind of the shit that they had to deal with, that your dad and your uncle had to deal with when you were a kid. I was kind of curious if that had filtered even on maybe an unconscious level. I don't know unless you would have talked about that in therapy or something. If you if you're if you could actually answer that. But I was kind of curious about whether their experiences ever colored your own thoughts about doing this as a career.
Not me, but my mom quite clearly discouraged me from getting into the music business for those reasons. And also it wasn't, I'm an okay musician now, but as a kid, it wasn't like I was a genius and I wanted to be a musician, and they tried to talk me out of it, and they were thwarting my brilliance or something like that. I was just in shitty garage bands or whatever. And they were just okay, well, they've been around brilliant musicians, and they're okay, we know what brilliant is, and our kid is not brilliant, so we should probably talk him out of doing this for his own sake. She was pretty specific about telling me not to get into it, that it was, she never said, well, son, you suck. She was a little nicer than that.
Right.
But she said, it destroys people's hearts, which it does. But it's, this is a kind of corny thing to say, but a lot of times, one's obsession and, need to pursue music is kind of out of their hands. And, over time and through a lot of practice, I got a little bit better. And then, just kind of by luck, got a halfway decent record deal for the band I play in now. And, stuff has since sort of slowly chugged along. But yeah, my mom certainly was looking out for me, or trying to look out for me because of that. She's very nice about it now, because things worked out.
The thing that with your parents, my parents don't understand. They still barely understand what I do, but it is interesting that once you have some kind of markers of success, that they relax a little bit.
It wasn't even that. It wasn't even that my mom became relaxed about it once I started making a living. It was well after that. I think she just realized that I wasn't ever going to stop doing it. As recently as 3 years ago, my mom and I at this point I had a very difficult childhood and a tough relationship with her, but now we're very close. And we were on a hike together, and just out of nowhere, we weren't even talking about it. She says, she just looked at me. She's like, music, how much fucking longer are you going to do this? I was just I don't know what to tell you, Mom. So, I think I don't know. I think her support now, I think, has more to do with resignation than necessarily that I'm making a living.
Yeah.
Although she is not, she is sweet about it.
Yeah. No, I get that.
I gave her a look that I think she realized it's way too late and she had gone too far and she hasn't brought it up since.
I mean, even like at some point, you said you started out playing in kind of like shitty garage bands. Your words, not mine. But
I was not good.
At some point, I mean, there's a lot of people I talk to on the show, or people who I like, who I can generally tell what they're. I know what a song of yours is. I know you have a style that's kind of particularly yours, and at some point that style of yours developed. And even then, was there any kind of acknowledgement that you were doing something that was new, interesting? I don't know, whatever kind of adjective you want to use, but that there was something that was yours and that kind of came out of who you were, that your parents acknowledged. Does that make sense at all?
Sure. My dad died probably, like, the band had been around for about a year and he died. He came to one show and he kind of helped out in the studio for one day for our first record. After that, his mind was pretty gone before he died, but after that one show he came to, which was maybe 2 months before he died, he'd had some nice things to say about it for sure. And I have more or less asked my mom not to investigate stuff that we're working on musically. I mean, a lot of it is extraordinarily personal, and I know things that would disturb her or upset her. She has once or twice expressed some interest in wanting to hear some things. I once gave her like a comp CD of what I thought were the least troublesome songs, which received no comment from her whatsoever. Although she does have although she did buy a record of ours and frame it and put it in her living room, so I think she feels mixed about it. Yeah, I have never discussed the specifics of what we are up to with my mom. Although, I mean, she's an aesthetically minded person, and I'm sure we could have a conversation about it. And things kind of got rolling towards the, not an awesome time in my dad's life, so we didn't talk that much about it. But I will say one thing, that one piece of advice that he gave me about music was that he regretted that he did not take things far enough when he was working on music. He was always wanted to make things be very nice and kind of clean and pure and beautiful sounding, and he said he always wished that he had gone much further. And he encouraged me to do that. I think he saw that was kind of my inclination. And I think his saying that was a way to acknowledge that it was a viable path to explore deeply. So in a roundabout way, he was encouraging. And, and my mom in her own ways, I think also.
Yeah. I mean, it must be difficult for her because this, whatever your dad dealt with, that's all wrapped up in what you do, right? I don't know her obviously, but it seems like those things are difficult to pull apart and to kind of take separately, treat you as your own individual.
I don't know. I mean, probably to a degree. But I don't think it's quite as intertwined as that. The relationship I have with her is so completely separate from my music life that I don't. And she wasn't really particularly intertwined all that much in my dad's music life either. So I'm not sure. It's possible, but I don't know that it's that much of a thing.
But I just meant more she see whatever your dad had to go through. She's like you said he'd left music because of drugs.
Yeah.
I mean, was that a conscious decision? Was he just like, oh, this is not good for me, or was it
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember he sat us down and was like, okay, I need to get out of the music business. It will probably mean that I'm home more, but it'll probably mean that we have less money. What do you guys think about that? And we were all obviously I was a kid. It was a weird question to ask a child. So I was just like, sure, Dad, whatever you need to do. So I mean, it was something he was clearly struggling with. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, just because like I'm just trying to like empathize with her and see it from her point of view to see like, oh, my husband went through a lot of problems with this, and I'm imagining that my son could also have some of these problems. Or
I'm sure she's concerned about it. I mean, she knows firsthand that it's a tough life. But I mean, I don't have the same issues that my dad does. I mean, I'm insane, but I'm not as crazy as he was. And I have some issues with substance abuse, but it's not anywhere near as bad as his.
Yeah.
And like being on tour is not a healthy way to live, and I'm sure she gets concerned about that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, the extremes to which the extreme ways in which he dealt with the difficulties of his life are, on my end, infinitely less extreme.
Yeah.
That was not a clear way to put that.
No, I got what you're saying.
I'm not as crazy as he was.
No, I understood because I also just think about just like parental relationships in general and how you can use them as a template or as like something to push back against, right?
Oh yeah. I was so sort of separate from my parents. Were way too hands off when I was a kid. They were both really young, and both, as I said, nuts. So they were kind of dealing with their own stuff. There wasn't a ton of hands-on parenting when I was growing up. I think they were too young and too crazy to be that involved.
Was it just that, I mean, when you say crazy, was it just like the times, they
they were both manic depressive, like literally crazy.
Oh, literally dealing with manic.
Yeah,
in a time before that was really acknowledged.
Yeah. Like the reason, like my mom and I have a good relationship now because she's managed to sort it out. But when I was growing up and into my early adulthood, we had a really difficult time. She's a wonderful person now, but it took a long time for her to kind of get through the morass that is her heart and mind.
Yeah,
and my dad never got out. Just a different, as you said, scientifically and socially, a very not people don't deal with things the same way they do now. At all.
No, and in fact, the more I talk to people on the show about some of these things, it's really weird, like that even. Like well into our childhoods, well into like our teenage years, you and I are about the same age. It wasn't really acknowledged. Like I think in the 90s, people started to really talk about these things in public, but still it's even now, in 2021, people don't really talk about depression and mental illness outside of, artistic circles or like on Twitter or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's making some progress, but I think I think the main hassle about it is just its unacknowledgement with health insurance. Only because my health insurance has no mental health coverage, so yep. Much it sucks.
Yeah, same here.
Or it does, but it's like pointlessly vague and incomplete. We'll get there someday. With all large social change, it's incredibly incremental and slow, or maybe we won't. It's a strange drag considering how prevalent it is that it's still relatively swept under the rug.
You think the WGA would cover? Do they? Wait, I don't know now. I should probably look up on that before I slander them on a podcast. But no, because I'm just kind of curious about this. The household you grew up in. You have like I guess a negative depiction of what the music business could be, but also you have, like you said, I'm paraphrasing what you said, but you have this like feeling inside you, like I need to do this.
Well, and certainly, a negative vision of what the music business is like, but a very positive vision of what music is. I mean, there's two totally different worlds and two totally different functions. I mean, music was something that was, and art generally was always put across and made available as something that was, a reason to live, or, I mean, I don't mean this melodramatically or hyperbolically, as a salvation. So that as a pursuit outside of, the pitfalls of other people's sort of, selfishness and greed and, lack of sort of heart and vision that a lot of times unfortunately drives the music business.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they were separate things, separate worlds, as they are in fact.
Yeah, but the business concern, the business part of it, I see chase a lot of people who are good artists away.
I will say that our both of the main labels we've worked with and my two agents are fantastic people, though. So I would like it to be noted there are fantastic people in the music business.
Totally.
The structure of the music business itself and big companies within the music business, particularly streaming companies or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Those are incredible, like criminal enterprises. But the people around us are great.
Yeah.
I feel really
on the
lucky.
local level, my agents, I love my agent. I think she's really wonderful, and she gets me work. And a lot of the executives that I've worked with before are wonderful people who have smart things to say and have good notes. I think it's the structural kinds of concerns that that are like the psychopathic structural concerns that aren't created by humans but are somehow this kind of like larger, I don't know how to describe it besides structural, this larger structural thing that can crush you and that does not care about your artistic concerns, and that has like it cares about it as if it's some kind of monster, cares about a bottom line somewhere, cares about a number on a spreadsheet somewhere. And I think that is incompatible, or not incompatible, but like it can be incompatible with making good art.
Oh yeah, I mean, as evidenced by the last 20 years of music, with the rise of the internet, and the decrease in the quality of music.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's been the history of pop music since the 20s. So
yeah. So I mean, you have these two. That's the thing that I'm kind of curious about. Like when you're growing up, you have these two. You have examples of like people making great art and the kind of structural problems with the music business, and you see those side by side. Or I'm projecting this on you, and you can tell me if it's true or not.
Oh, I mean, I wasn't particularly aware as a kid. I mean, I saw that my dad was struggling in a lot of ways, but I think I just didn't know specifically what the root of them was until I was an older adult. And like I said, I mean, he wasn't really around all that much. And I wanted to play in bands, but so things weren't that clearly laid out for me. Mm-hmm. I mean, my own awareness of the difficulties of the music business came, firsthand. It wasn't so much like I went into it with a sort of base of knowledge from what not to do from my dad. And also, I mean, he was also dealing with in a completely different world of music than I was. I mean, he was doing, like making huge records, like all kind of major label stuff. And and I was going down kind of like a punk rock / sort of art path.
right.
So I mean, it was pursued in different kinds of ways, and it wasn't as I went down that path to rebel on the path that he was going down. It was just the stuff that I was interested in fit more into that world.
Yeah, he was by the time you were a child, he was a producer, right?
Yeah. He wasn't touring much. I think he was playing a little session guitar still when I was a kid, but by then mostly he was producing. Yeah,
I had read like he had produced like Billy Joel's.
That was his biggest record. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, like, well, what part of Los Angeles did you grow up in?
In the Valley.
In the Valley.
The San Fernando Valley. Yeah.
And I mean, what was your life like then? Is it just like a typical childhood, or did your parents, did their manic depressive Was it a constant kind of thing you dealt with in your house, or was it just like something that flares up every once in a while?
Looking back on it, I have to say, unfortunately, it was pretty constant. I mean, at the time, I didn't realize how unusually tense it was, and sort of emotionally extreme things were every day. I realized that as an adult, and I sort of, my siblings both have children, and I look at their households, and they're both pretty regular, even parents. And we have all discussed how I think by them having become parents, they realized how completely cuckoo it was when we were kids. My parents at their best, but like I said, a lot of that stuff was out of their hands. So no, I mean, I did not have an awesome childhood. Some aspects of it were great, and that because my parents were both into art and because they were checked out, I had an incredible amount of free time. No child on earth or in the Western world now has as much free time and lack of supervision as I and yet still lives. So the upside of that is, my kind of imagination world.
Yeah.
There would be days of not checking in with my parents and just, running all over the neighborhood. There was food in the house. I am still alive, so I must have been microwaving myself hot dogs or whatever. And then they would kind of settle and check in on us and make sure we were doing okay. I went to school, and I had clothes, so, and I had hobbies and stuff like that. So, it wasn't total, complete chaos, but it was like days of like Lord of the Flies, and then days of fairly normal suburban childhood, from what I can kind of piece together.
Yeah.
And I think that back and forth, emotionally and psychologically, it was not fantastic for me. I could be a handful to deal with. I think as anybody who had a kind of unhinged childhood. But I think it did because there was so much creative freedom. It did lead to that being kind of my central drive as a person, for better or worse. But that is a kind of a self definition and purpose to existence. I think has everything to do with that having been my, purpose of existence as a child, as well.
Do you think? Obviously, you've talked about that this wasn't like great, but I'm trying to find some kind of silver lining. Do you think it allowed you to find your identity a little sooner than other people? It took me forever to figure out who I was as a person.
Oh, I never think about it. I guess I just said it. I don't think it has ever. I don't think it has never not felt that way. I think because it was the way that I could exist in the world as a child and not go completely off the rails, living in an imagination world.
Yeah.
And not in an unhealthy sort of delusional way. We were playing. I played games with the other like rat-fucked kids in the neighborhood. But we knew they were games. It never felt like, it. But I think because, that's always where I was as a kid, so it's always where I wanted to be as an adult. So it wasn't like I came to that realization later on. So it wasn't necessarily a matter of finding myself younger. I think it was just maybe being cast in an unhealthy, obsessive bronze at a younger age.
Interesting.
Maybe made rather than grown.
Interesting.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Because I was trying to think about how, some kind of positive way of understanding it. because I started to feel at some point also lived in an imaginative world, and at some point I started to feel shame for it, and I feel like I may have gotten unconscious signals from my parents. And
Luckily, my parents were very encouraging of it.
Yeah.
I think because they were interested in art, and I think they also knew. I mean, they were aware that things sucked when we were kids, and they would say things like, "What we are doing sucks. Do not do this to your own kids. Don't do this. We don't want to be this way. We know we are this way. We're trying not to be this way." And I think that's a lot of what made me get out of it, not be as crazy as them, is because I was like, "Oh, this is what crazy looks like. I don't want to do this." And they said, "No, you don't want to do this."
Yeah.
And I think, because I was trying to cope with it through creativity, and they were both interested in creativity as well, they would encourage it. So very fortunately, they didn't necessarily want me to get into the music business, but they certainly encouraged the pursuit of creativity on a fundamental level.
Yeah. But I do think, it's an interesting cocktail that I haven't really seen on, many times, at least on the show before, where like you have, there are problems, but they're very self-aware about the problems.
Yeah. To their credit. And I know that's why, despite all the rotten things that happened between my mom and I when I was a kid, that we can have a relationship now, is because all along she's copped to it. There's some stuff that I brought up that she's just like, I was so fucked up then, I don't even remember that, but I completely believe you that happened. And I'm really sorry. We've been able to have conversations like that. And I think because of that, it's real easy for me to go, okay, let's begin again.
Yeah. Was there something that changed for your mom, or was it just the fact that, like, in America, mental health started to become an actual...
It's more like that. I think she got into the right therapy.
Yeah.
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 Said, because she acknowledged it all along, she knew it was something that she didn't want to live with and live like. Mm-hmm. So she, was, making efforts to move beyond it, but just the tools weren't there, or things were too chaotic, or my dad was a nightmare to be married to, and, like that.
Did your mom also have creative pursuits?
Not so much as an individual, but as a fan. She used to take me to art movies when I was a kid, and take me to museums and things like that. Yeah, and and she still enjoys things like that now.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So she had good taste.
She's a hippie, man.
Well, that's what I originally was thinking about. Was like, oh, well, they went through the '60s, and
yeah, she lived in San Francisco in 1967. Like, she was like right there. My dad picked my mom up hitchhiking. That's how they met.
Oh, okay. Well, how
couldn't be more classic?
And especially San Francisco in the late '60s. Ground Zero. That's just a crazy time there too. How did she end up there?
She grew up in Sausalito, which is just like a suburb in the Bay Area, and
then just kind of migrates over and just like.
It's like San Francisco to Oakland. Or like the Valley to LA. They're that far away. Yeah.
And then as the culture changes, it just kind of like sweeps her along with it, I guess.
I think people just, as anyone who grows up in the suburbs, they go into the city to do stuff that's cool.
Right.
So it was the same kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up not outside of Philly. That's the dumb way of saying it. That's like when someone like grows up in Weehawken and they're like, yeah, I'm from New York. Okay. I grew up in Reading, which is about an hour from Philly.
Yeah.
But Philly was always the beacon. It's like whenever we wanted to see a cool show, we would have to go to Philly to do that. So your dad picks her up while she's hitchhiking?
Yeah. And so the story goes.
And that's how they met. Yeah, that could not be a more 1960s.
No, it could not.
Story. So how does your dad get into the music business in the first place? Or how does he start playing music? Because he was in a band.
Yeah. His brother was in a very, very famous band called the Kingston Trio.
Yes.
And kind of, and I think because his brother was doing it, it was around, and he got my dad interested in it. And then his brother, John Stewart, he wrote a bunch of hit songs for other people and had a bunch of hit songs himself. Wow, after he did Kingston Trio stuff.
So were your grandparents musical?
No, I don't know where it came from with them. Unfortunately, my father and uncle's parents were extraordinarily abusive pieces of shit, and I think that they got into music as a way to just have any kind of life outside of the abusive bullshit they put up with.
Oh God.
Yeah, they were pretty rotten people.
So it's like you and your siblings really kind of escaped. Like your siblings, you said that they're pretty normal parents.
Yeah.
It seems like you guys have like really kind of been able to escape this kind of.
I mean, a lot of that has to do with kind of what I talked about before, and my parents acknowledging that the path that they were going down is not one that should be repeated.
Yeah.
And encouraging us to move beyond that. I mean, my parents they were not good parents when we were kids, but they said that they loved us. So it was definitely a combination of love and support and total chaos and abuse, but both of those things existed at the same time. Yeah. It wasn't much more of one and much more of the other. It was a weirdly even amount of both. So my siblings are both equally nuts as I am, but I think because they have kids, or I'm fairly certain because they have kids, they've out of necessity have champed that down a lot more than I have to. I can get away with a lot more shit because I don't have to be as responsible.
Do you think this might be a stretch, but do you think in some way making music allows you to channel some of this stuff, that some of this energy that could otherwise?
That's not a stretch at all. I mean, I think that's the case for anybody who works on music. It's a place to put all that. I mean, it could go into smoking meth, or it could go into working on music. I mean, right. You gotta put this stuff somewhere.
Right, but that's what I meant. Like
energy does not go away. I mean, it's physics.
Yes.
Emotional energy is the same as physical energy. It's got to go somewhere.
I think about that so much. I've been thinking about that for a decade now. Like, what do you do with that energy? And if you don't put it into your art, it can go into very self-destructive. I mean, it still can go into self-destructive stuff, even if you are making art. But I think some of the stuff that could go inward, you're now putting outward.
Oh yeah, clearly and precisely that. Yeah.
Yeah, like all my existential woes go into the characters that I write in scripts, as opposed to me just screaming into a pillow.
Yeah, it's a better place for them to be.
Like, was there a point where you're a very both personally and in your art, emotionally open? Were you always like that? Was there a point where you started where you were more closed off or repressed, and it started to become more emotionally open, or a third option?
I think I've kind of always been that way. I mean, and a combination of being emotionally open is a flattering way to put it, and excessively sensitive and overly emotional is probably a more accurate way to put it. Yeah. Those things I have definitely always been.
Yeah, I get that.
And still am. I mean, I try to, I'm fucking 42 now, so I'm trying to be more of a grown-up when I deal with that kind of stuff, and flip out less. But I certainly still flip out, hopefully less than I used to.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's not productive.
Yeah. Totally.
I checked. Angela is my bandmate and my closest friend, and she's probably about as overly emotional as I am, but she deals with it a lot better. And I was real drunk the other night, and I was talking to her about it. I was like, God, I can't do this anymore. Like, how do you do this? And she goes, I totally understand. And basically, when I'm flipping out and someone is bothering me, I ask myself, what do I want to have happen right now? Mm-hmm. And then I try to act in the way to have what I want to have happen. And I was like, oh, what a simple and concrete way to do it. So I don't know. I've been trying that a little bit more recently, and things are going slightly better. We'll see. I don't know. It seems like a lame thing to have learned. I mean, it seems like the kind of thing you could explain to an 8-year-old that I'm sure I probably should have been. I'm sure probably should have been revealed to me a long time ago. I know that I would have more friends if I had developed that skill at an earlier age.
Yeah, but it's also you don't. There's no. But one. The mental health. Sorry, there's like three things I want to say, but one, the mental health, just the way it's understood in America is just so terrible that it's tough. You have to like really kind of excavate you have to really kind of, a better metaphor, dig out from under. It's like you're under the stuff to get these like lessons that like, you know, you say like for me, like, you know, same kinds of things. And I should have learned them as a child. And instead I'm learning them in my 30s into my 40s.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's the point of living, is to just continue to work on that stuff.
Yeah. But also, you know, not only just like America in general, but also just, you know, dealing with the kinds of things you had to deal with. I'm sure there are a lot of detritus you have to clear away. Just from
I
your
know
own.
why I'm like this. I just wish I wasn't. The origin is very clear.
But I mean, the thing that I've learned in therapy, that it's just practicing the stuff. It's just doing the work. It's you know, like your bandmate said, you know, it's every time that feeling comes up and you recognizing that feeling and then saying to yourself, all right, how should I act to have the result I want happen?
Yeah.
And then it just becomes, at some point you just internalize it, and then it's not as much of a struggle.
Yeah, true enough.
Yeah. But I mean, how does, you know, when you were making, well, let me just ask this actually. Did you make like an actual conscious decision, like, I want to do this for a living, I want to make music for a living, I want to be in a band?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I had played in bands. I mean, the first little band I was in junior high, but, and I played through college. But let's see, I did it and I enjoyed doing it, but I was, you know, I think because, as I had mentioned before, my mom was talking me out of it and saying, you know, you got to have a plan B. And also, I mean, it wasn't like I was great and I wasn't like super successful or something. I mean, I recognized that I felt something from it and was okay at it. You know, but it wasn't like a ton of doors were opening for me or something like that, and it wasn't a clear thing to do. But when I graduated, I studied social work at school, and I had a professor who took me aside one day. I think he had heard me talking about music at one point, and he said, Professor Douglas Quiet. I'll always remember him. He was a really good teacher.
Wait, sorry, did you say Douglas Quiet?
Yeah.
Quiet.
Yeah.
Professor Quiet.
Professor
Sorry,
Quiet.
it's just a great name.
He was a social worker too. It was a good social worker name. But he took me aside and he said, you know, it's okay for you to try to do music. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Like, and I think it was at that point where, I mean, even though I worked in social work for a few years after that, it took me a while to come to the realization that I didn't need to feel guilty about doing it, even though I still do to an extent. Not as much as I mean, clearly I'm doing it and have for a long time. But it was at that point that I think I really knuckled down and began to work, you know, 10 times harder. And I think it was after that, and after putting in so much more kind of intensive work and focus that, you know, over those couple of years, and then that's about the time that Shoo Shoo started coming together. And also I asked my I think I asked my dad, some older together musician that I knew, just like, how do you make this happen? Like, what? Like, I don't know. Like, do you have any like promotion secrets or something? And they were like, there's no secrets to promotion. The secret is make the best possible record that you can make. Put everything you can into it, and if it's the right record and the right people hear it, they'll come to you. Yeah. And I just felt so relieved. I was like, I mean, I don't have to drive around putting up fucking flyers for my dumbass band all over the Bay Area. Thank God. You know, and I just worked really hard on the first Shoo Shoo record along with Corey McCulloch. And, you know, I mean, that record is still in print, so hopefully, I mean, that was kind of the beginning of anything I had worked on still existing or maybe having some meaning for other people. God, I hope I answered that clearly.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever thought about it. I'm still kind of forming that thought. Pardon me.
Well, because I'm just
Short answer, Doug was quiet. Said, go for it. The other person said, just work really hard. Go for it. And then I tried to go for it, and something kind of worked out.
Yeah. I mean, that's all, it takes a long time, I think, to learn that lesson that, all you have control over is making the best thing you can make. And the rest of it's just like, if it happens to strike a chord with culture,
lucky
okay.
You.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were on this label for a little while called Bella Union in England, and the bass player the head of that label is Simon Raymond, who was the bass player from the Cocktail Twins. And we got this record that they put out that I was feeling good about, but people did not like it. Generally, I was not getting good reviews. And I remember I was talking to him on the phone. I was like, what do we do? And he was just like, buddy, I hate to tell you, nobody knows. And it was kind of a relief to hear. I mean, just like, okay, I mean, we did our best, and sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. There was this kid whose record I had produced a few years ago, and his career didn't really go anywhere. And he wrote to me, and he was like, what do I do for promotion to put my band together? And I essentially just said, what I just said, like, put your whole heart into it, do the best, put everything you can into it. And he wrote back, and he was like, your advice is to do your best? Fuck you. I was like, all right, buddy. Good luck. I do not care.
Yeah. I mean, the other...
Yeah. It's good, it's terrible advice, but it's also the truest advice.
Yeah. The other advice is become a sociopath.
Yeah, or, why else do it if you're not going to do your best?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the point.
If you are... Because that's all you can control is
it's the only reason too. I mean, like it's the only good reason to do it is to give the most of yourself.
The other people that I've seen succeed, I don't know if they do this consciously or if they're unconsciously psychopaths, but they just are able to bully their way into a career in some way.
I certainly have seen some friends of mine who started out not famous, who became famous, who act famous now, and it's a little weird to see, but not everybody.
Yeah.
I don't think you have to act famous.
No.
And by that being kind of bullying, slightly sociopathic, in order to be successful. I think fame, unfortunately, makes some people do that. But really, the most successful person that I'm friends with is not like that at all. He's just fucking great, and just works his ass off. So it's, I think it's a symptom of fame, not a cause of fame.
Yeah. And something else I was thinking of, was there ever a thought in your head, you are not making, I waver back and forth when I say this, I think about, okay, so your dad produced like a Billy Joel album. Billy Joel is I had to reckon with at some point, knowing that the stuff that I write, people like it, and there's an audience for it, but it's never going to be the audience of, whatever a rock movie is, or, it's not going to be the same as The Rock, sorry.
Okay.
It's never going to be, the audience that's a Fast and the Furious type of thing, right? And I had to reckon with that and be like, okay, so I know who is going to respond to the kind of things I write, and I know what that audience is. And for you, was there a similar type of thing? It's just not. It's not going to be Billy Joel.
Oh yeah. Let's see. I think I had just played so many little tiny dirtbag shows to start with that I was pretty comfortable with that world. That still kind of being in that world is totally fine for me. There was a period, our third record is kind of the record that sort of got us, at the sort of plateau we're at now of kind of being a low boil cult band that I'm sure will be as long as we exist. Not much else, not much less. And kind of at that point, that was kind of the first time I dealt with, this is working out. And I had to when things would not go well, then they hurt me more because I think I began to have an expectation of, a broader level of success than is really possible, in the realm of the kind of music that we're doing. And then I just came to the realization that, like all of those bands that are doing way better than us, I think suck. And I just I have no interest in that music at all. Like that is 1,000,000,000,000% not for me as a person. And when I came to that realization, I'd still never read reviews because I'm, as I mentioned before, overly sensitive, and they still make me feel bad. Good, positive or negative reviews make me feel horrible. But yeah, but when I came to the realization that we're extraordinarily lucky to be able to make records at all. And I just thank God every day that hopefully they get into the hands of the small number of kids for whom these records are right for, and just be grateful that I get to be a part of, that process at all.
Yeah.
There's some humongous bands that I totally love and are really meaningful for me. But when I think of, people who are my quote unquote, peers, plus or minus 15 years, most of the stuff that's popular, I think, is horrendous. Mm-hmm. And we're not in that world, and it's totally okay.
Yeah. I only ask it because
it doesn't bother me. Yeah.
Yeah, because when you are making art that is, when you pour yourself into your art and you're being very honest, that's what I call, whether anyone else has this definition or not, that's what I call good art. When you're really being, I think that's the best kind of stuff, or the stuff that resonates with me the most is that kind of, is feeling that honesty, or feeling who you are, which I can feel when I listen to your music.
Oh, thanks.
It feels like I know in some way, some, abstract way, some molecule of yourself is in that. And there are, that's why I started off kind of asking about the music business stuff, because I feel like that can destroy that feeling sometimes in the artist, or the kind of.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No. It's more of a prompt than a question. So.
Oh,
please.
yeah. I have certainly gone through periods of, for those very reasons, just feeling too beat down by what people's assessment of what we were doing was, and have thought about quitting. Very specifically through, it's kind of pathetic to say, but through talking with my therapist, she just said, stop talking about quitting music. Just decide not to quit music. I was like, oh, yeah, that certainly makes it easier. And then it just became not an issue,
Yeah.
If I can continue to do it for a living, I will definitely continue to do it for a living. And if I can't, I'll get a day job again like I had before, and also do music. Like, it's whether or not I have a day job is not the contingency upon which I continue to choose to do music. And, it made it a whole lot easier. But yeah, when you, and it's one of the reasons my mom was concerned about me getting into it, because she knew that I'm oversensitive. When you put your whole self into something, and it's some shithead who goes to Brown or whatever, writes a huge, unfounded, uneducated, shitty review of it on a gigantic music blog, then that's the history of that record for eternity. It's some 20-year-old who's listened to 5 records in their whole life.
Yeah.
And then that's it, and you feel so kind of like you feel, or I feel, hurt and powerless and pointless, and it's like, what these last fucking 2 years don't mean anything now, that I put into making this record. And that's one reason I don't read reviews. And on the off chance I happen to accidentally come across one, I think through time and through some therapy and able to just go, that person doesn't matter. it's easier to deal with if you know that you, like you said, or like we were talking about before, if you know that you did your best, and if it doesn't go well publicly, you can still live with it, because even though it may not hit with people, you know you meant it at the time, and the next day you try again.
Yeah.
And that was a long time for me to come to. I think I mentioned to, I think I probably talked to Angela about this, that I used to be in music because I felt bad and I needed to have something to put there, but now it's just music that makes me feel bad. So why am I still doing this? That was kind of when I was going through like a really uncertain period.
Yeah.
And fortunately for me, I got over that, and I'm still in the incredibly sort of, I don't know how else to say it, blessed position to still be able to work on music.
It's so funny that you said earlier, this resonated with me so much when you were like, even the good reviews, you have trouble. I have trouble processing joy. I have trouble processing people's compliments. As much as
it's not even for that. For me, it's more just like, this is so childish. Just like, they like that? What are they talking about? Oh. That part's dumb. Or like people not getting it or something, mm-hmm. or even if it's good, it seems to me to present it in a way that I don't like. It's ridiculous. It's I just stay out of it now. I'm so dumb about that kind of stuff. I should just say thanks that anybody listened to it at all.
We're right at the end of the show. I have two last questions. One, because this stuck in my head, because it again, this resonated with me a lot. When you said you had guilt about it, I just wanted to ask a little bit more about that, about making music, because I have so much guilt, and guilt and shame are my primary movers in my.
Amen. I mean, I think it's part of it is having gone to school with a human service, with a social work major, and wanting to work in a more direct way in human service, feeling that, music is, which it is to a degree, kind of a self-indulgent, self-focused pursuit, and feeling guilty about doing that versus doing something more direct. It's more about that when I feel guilty about it. And then, for better or worse, I'm a much more dedicated musician than I was a social worker. I think it's not because I didn't care. I think it's just for whatever reason, this is the way the universe designed my brain, is to really be able to dig into that. And I'm sure, the day when I stop being able to make music for a living, I know I'll go back into human service. It's sort of, and I think probably now it will be much easier because I've had a long time to work on music. It's not like I got it out of my system, but the drive to sort of prove to myself that I could do it professionally is not there anymore. Like, I have done it. And I'm grateful to be able to continue to do it. But, if I can't do it anymore, it doesn't, I don't feel valueless as a person.
Yeah.
I think it's just wanting to contribute to society in the most effectual way. And sometimes it's difficult for me to come to terms with that. The way that the universe set it up for me to do that is through music, I hope. I hope that this is the right thing for me to be doing. Mm. I don't know what else to do. So until then, I'll keep doing this. But I feel mixed about art. To me personally, as a fan, is unbearably important and meaningful. But I do think that it is simultaneously wildly overvalued in Western society, and at the same time simultaneously wildly undervalued in different ways.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a hard. I mean, it's both things. It gives definition and meaning to life, and but at the same time, people talk about, what is it like being an artist? I don't know, man. It's like fucking. It's like making coffee. I don't know. It's just part of the day.
You just feel compelled. You just have this thing that you have to I can't not. I have this idea and it just annoys me and drives me crazy until I put it onto the page or until I make a dumb, even just like some shitty video that I put on like Instagram or something like that, just some comedy thing. Like it just like drives me crazy in my head until I make it manifest in the world, and then I can relax.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's the same for you, but like.
Absolutely. And I think that it's essential to being a certain type of person, but I don't necessarily think that being that type of person is any more valuable than being any other kind of person.
No.
And I think that's the part where I think that in some ways arts is overvalued because because it's more public, sometimes people view that as being more valuable than whatever other drives or compulsions people have.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably a little bit of the guilt for me comes from that. But at the same time, humans wouldn't not have been making art since they became humans if it was not something that was inherently valuable in our collective experience. So I don't know. There's no balance or to it.
Yeah,
it's part of its horrible charm.
It's really tough to kind of reckon with that stuff, because I was nodding and I was like making like affirmative noises while you were talking, because it like struck me. It's such a deep struggle for myself, and I didn't intellectually agree with you, but I emotionally identified 100% with what you were saying, because it's like it's the guilt, and I mean, of like, I could be an activist, I could be organizing, I could go to factories, or I could go to Amazon warehouses, and I could help organize people, which would probably be better. But also, I get a lot of notes and messages and things like that, my podcast with my wife, or this, or something I wrote or made, like helped someone through something. And I'm not trying to be self-aggrandizing or say that like that's the, I make stuff that's so important, and I get at the heart of humanity with some comedy thing I did it, because I'm not trying to, but like if it does help someone get through some tough period in their life, I can't discount that as like that.
Yeah, that's a tough thing. Like certainly being a art fan and being a music fan gets me through life. And it's hard for me to reckon with, possibly being a part of that continuum also in some small way, with just the Protestant childhood of, wanting to try to contribute positively to the world.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, my sister, who's a school teacher, says it's okay to do. Angela, my bandmate, works in public health. She says it's okay to do. My mom, who doesn't even want me to do in the first place, says it's okay to do. So, and kind of going back to what we said, I mean, if you got to put your whole self into it anyway, or it doesn't have any meaning, or value, or it's not going to be as good as someone. Music fans deserve the best possible music that you can make, and if you're not going to do that, or if you're going to do that with any hesitancy, then you really need to think about why you're doing it. I just said to myself to remind myself of that.
Last question. Do you remember, was there a moment, or was this just a process, when you went from just playing shitty garage bands, again, your words, to like putting yourself into your music in a more honest way?
It was an arc. It wasn't like one day I was like, here it is. There wasn't any one moment. I think it was just over time. I mean, different people feel differently about this, but for me, there's certainly a big sort of, and I mean this in the broadest way, of sort of spiritual component to being involved in music, and also to a degree, I think adding, wanting to have music be of some aspect of human service, and then also just kind of coming to the realization that, of putting one's entire self into it. Just those things kind of slowly coalescing. And then also, just when I got to the point where instead of working on music maybe 5 hours a week, when I started working on music, 1,000 hours a week, that was actually came fairly quickly. I was just like, oh wow, if I'm going to do this, I got to do this. And there was, a lot of realization and sort of technical things developed in that period. But I don't know. I think it was just kind of all of those things coming together maybe over 2 or 3 years. But, how I felt when I was in shitty garage bands versus kind of at the beginning of Shusha were two totally different mindsets. But it was, it was over. It was like a dial kind of turning from doing it for sort of unconscious fun to trying to be as dedicated as I could be.
Oh, interesting. So I wonder if it was the kind of just like, even if it was unconscious or conscious, like I'm going to do this for real. If that allowed you maybe to focus a little more, almost like.
Yeah, for sure. It in a way that's difficult to really quantify, but was almost like it just felt physically different.
Yeah.
It's sort of inhabiting a different, almost like entering a room of just like what music was to what it is now. And I think it's kind of been the lifelong pursuit, is to continue to go from one room to the next in terms of, different aspects of focus or different aspects of dedication or learning more or trying to get better at it. The wonderful thing about music and all art, it's, this is so fucking corny, but it's true, is that, it's like you can never solve this puzzle. And that's why as humans we've done it as long as we've been humans, and we'll probably continue to do as long as we're humans, is, there's always more to learn and there's always more to get into. And you've been doing it for a long time. I'm sure you know the same thing. That's the most exciting thing about it, is it is endless. Mm-hmm. And when I hear artists who are, 30 years older than me still totally stoked about working on it, it's so exciting for me. It's a wonderful, you do anything for a long time, you get a little discouraged or uncertain or whatever, and to hear someone who's, 20 times better than you has been doing it 20 times longer, incredibly enthusiastic, just like, oh my God, like there are still so many more musical planets to explore. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I love that. Jamie, thank you for joining me today.
Oh man, it's really nice to talk to you. I hope I made any sense. I felt I rambled a little.
No, trust me, I've talked to many ramblers before. I do not include you among them.
I heard your interview with Greg Saunier, my very dear friend, the other day.
He's great. I love that. I loved the tangents we took in that one.
Yeah, it was cool. There was some stuff. I've been friends with Greg since the late '90s, and there was a ton of stuff in there that I didn't know about him.
Yeah,
it was great.
But thanks again for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, you too. Thanks for the hustle.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh bye, oh bye, oh bye, oh bye, oh bye, oh bye.